At Randall Reilly, we've been helping fleets recruit drivers for decades. Now, over the years, we've seen the same recruiting mistakes cost fleets good drivers again and again. They're usually not dramatic. They're small breakdowns that quietly hurt recruiting performance every day. We call them the 7 deadly sins of driver recruiting. Today, I'll walk through the first 5. Now, the first sin is pride. Too many fleets assume their reputation speaks for itself. But today's drivers are talking to other drivers long before they ever talk to your recruiter. If you aren't actively managing your reputation, someone else is doing it for you. Now, the second sin is sloth. Speed matters more than ever. Drivers are often talking to 6 to 8 fleets at the same time, and the first fleet to respond usually wins the opportunity. Recruiting has become a race, and slow follow-up is costing fleets drivers every day. Now, the third sin is envy. Everyone is chasing the latest AI trend, but many fleets are solving the wrong problem. AI certainly has a place, but not if you're ignoring the fundamentals that drivers actually care about. Now, the fourth sin is wrath. One bad recruiting call can end the relationship before it ever begins. A missed call, long hold, or frustrating experience is often all it takes for a driver to move on to the next fleet. Now, the fifth sin, that's greed. Overselling the job may help you get a yes today, but when orientation doesn't match the promise, you've already lost the driver. Trust is one of the hardest things to earn back. The final 2 may actually be the most costly. We'll unpack the research behind them, explain why they're becoming bigger problems for fleets every year, and show you what the best recruiting teams are doing differently.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Digging Deeper. Boy, do I hate watching myself to start these things. Today, I have with me my trusty sidekick, Aaron Mowry. If this is your first time to Digging Deeper, I always try not to complete the Fight Club line when I start with that way. This is your first time at Digging Deeper. We've been doing things a little bit differently lately. We've been doing all of these live. We are looking at research that we've put out this year. And we have the chat, the live chat. I'm going to go ahead and tell everybody hello. We want to encourage everybody to participate in the live chat as much as possible. Be a part of what we're talking about. If you have something to say, please tell us all your thoughts. If you think something we say is wrong, tell us. If you think something we say is right, tell us. If you have a question, use the live chat. Now, the live chat is not anonymous. So if you do have an anonymous question that you are a little bashful about, feel free to use the Q&A. I think that's it. Am I missing anything? All right. So let's go ahead and jump into it. We're talking about the 7 deadly sins, and we try to keep these things to around 30 minutes. If you guys have lots of questions and want to talk, we'll go longer, but try to keep these things to about 30 minutes. So we're going to jump through these pretty quick and make sure we leave plenty of time at the end to talk about the final deadly sins. All right, let's go into the first one. The first one is pride, which we're going to dispense with the metaphor pretty quickly and just start talking about the actual how it relates to fleets. But the first one is basically the idea that I think a lot of fleets, and you can tell me if you think this is a correct assumption, I think a lot of fleets assume their reputation. And there's a particular line in this download that I thought was pretty interesting. It says, your reputation is built or broken in conversation you're never actually a part of. And the idea is that most people build their opinion of fleets by talking to other drivers. What would you have to say about that?
I mean, I think it's a true statement. I have a question, by the way. This just came out last week.
Correct.
Have they seen it yet, or they get it afterwards?
No, they have all seen it. Now, we'll add, Josh, if you want to add the full unredacted version, the full download without the last 2 redacted, are available if you hit that get the full download button in the top right corner.
Okay, but they have seen this.
They have seen this.
Okay.
Unless they haven't downloaded and just registered. But
okay,
if not, go ahead and download it real quick.
I mean, I think, yes, absolutely. Word of mouth is huge. I do think that I've had executives say before, it's different than many companies. Trucking's different. They have a billboard rolling down the road 24/7. And in some cases, 9,000 billboards rolling down the road. So I don't want to say that the reputation, I mean, obviously the driver interaction and talking to them in the truck stops matters, or CB radios, or at the DCs while they're sitting there waiting. But their trucks too. I know a lot of companies that pay big money to make sure that those trucks are run through the car wash
Right.
or the truck wash, clean, nice. There's something appealing about that for a driver who spends, 80% of their working hours inside that vehicle. So again, driver reputation
Right.
or fleet reputation isn't just about the driver. I do think it is a reflection of that vehicle.
Yeah, and I would say it even goes on to like, what's your first interaction look like when you call up, and how easy is your recruiting process? What is orientation like?
Yeah,
All those
absolutely.
things contribute to your. I mean, there's that stat that we got from a couple of years ago, and it may be in here, that the idea that 83% of drivers have said they knew they were not going to stay at a fleet just based off of orientation. So I think the idea is that they're constantly building an opinion of you. Now I'm going to make a bold I was going to make a bold statement, but I've instead decided to phrase it in the form of a question.
Okay.
Do you think your reputation as a fleet is your biggest asset for recruiting?
Do I think that? So selfishly, from an advertising perspective, we can run the same channels, same bid strategy, using, keyword data or job creation data, historicals, with different fleets, and they perform wildly different. And a lot of it, the majority of it, is the reputation. So again, selfishly, there is something to be said about certain fleets. I was on a call right before this with a fleet that has 35% turnover. Their campaign is going to produce exponentially better than some of the fleets that have a 150% turnover.
Keep talking. I'm going to put a poll up to see what the audience thinks.
I don't have anything else to say.
All right. Well, let's
answer your question. It is a huge factor.
All right. I have a lot of opinions about this next one, but our next deadly sin is basically speed, and like how quickly you're able to follow up with leads, how quickly you move people through the process. I think you could add in the idea of just how much friction is in there. Do you demand a full app? Do you have lots of different ways in which drivers can express interest? How important do you think, especially now that we see tightening of capacity? We have some questions up that we need to look at real quick. With capacity tightening, how important is speed to lead?
I try to be empathetic here. In the last 3 years, speed was not as important. And so they did that on purpose. They added friction to the hiring process. Maybe they didn't need inbound phone calls as much. Maybe they layered. Their short form was 10 questions instead of 3 or 4. And moving slower as a recruiting department, I think sometimes is necessitated. It's on purpose. So they're trying to find the ones that matter most, or the best candidates. So since about March, I have definitely seen that change. And the teams that have been slow to react to that change are the ones that are screaming right now. So to answer your question, yes, it is very important. It just wasn't as important.
Right. That makes sense. And I think with a lot of things we've talked about this a lot, as the market does dictate priorities for fleets big time, obviously. I mean, that's not a grand revelation, but there is some interesting stuff in the nuances, of how that operates. Now, I will say, so we have a question in the Q&A. It says, what was the percentage of people who leave based off of orientation? It's 83% have said they were going to leave. 83% have said they were going to leave just based off of orientation. They just knew. And
I saw it in here somewhere.
Yeah, I think it is actually in here. And the idea is just the sense they got from how orientation operated. I think it's on the 7th deadly sin.
It is in here.
Yeah, that the feeling they got from orientation, they just knew this was not a long-term fleet. What do you think about this? My biggest issue is speed to get drivers qualified.
Where are we now?
We are now, this is from the audience chat. Lisa
I'm sorry.
said, my biggest issue is speed to get drivers qualified. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think it goes back to, you mentioned in your promo, and it may be in here somewhere, but 6 to 8 fleets at a time
Yeah.
they're looking at. So again, just had a call earlier with a client, 30% turnover. They do not take inbound phone calls.
Right.
They only work full applications. So some of their friction's on purpose. And you're going to lose drivers that way. And they're somewhat okay with that, that we know that they're looking at 5 or 6 to 8 options, and we're only going to look at the best. But yeah, to get them qualified, a driver is, especially a good one, is driving during the day. So there's some of that is difficult, just getting the recruiter or the processing team connected with a driver when the driver's available or when recruiting's available. I don't have a great answer to that. Staggering your hours, working after hours, scheduling specific times for follow-up, handling as much of it on the initial call as possible. We've got some clients that first initial call may be 40 or 45 minutes. They'll do it all. They'll get the app, they'll start the process, they'll get a driver to sign that while he's on the phone with them.
So I guess that I was going to ask you for advice on how to qualify drivers faster, and one of them would be, if you can do it on the phone, go ahead and do it on the phone.
You obviously got to get their approval.
Right.
Yeah. And then the flip side is just take a look at your own process. There are times where safety, I think, is too involved, and recruiting will be waiting 3, 4, 5 days to hear back from safety. When if you benchmark off of some of your other peers, that's not what they're doing. So again, you can't completely change who you are, but if you're waiting 5 days for safety to get back to you, there is definitely some room for improvement.
Lisa had a follow-up. She said, safety at my company is the biggest hurdle. I can process the application fast. It's just the safety part.
Yeah. Yeah. And then maybe a benchmarking group we can get you connected with, or to look or talk to some other fleets and how they do it. I'm happy to do that. Again, selfishly from the advertising side, we see the same thing. If a client, when we're looking at potentially bringing on a new client and finding out how safety plays a part in recruiting, we try to set the expectations at the beginning. Hey, this is going to go as smoothly and quickly as safety, your biggest bottleneck. So anyway, happy to help there, but that is a big one.
Well, someone asked the question in the Q&A, what's the national average for qualifying drivers if you have this info?
Is the question specifically days?
I'm not sure. Maybe you can clarify if you asked that question, but maybe answer it if she's asking like days. So if that's leads, yes, days.
Okay. Gosh, I would have to get some better data. There are quite a few fleets who train their recruiters to know what they're looking for. To maybe you have different levels of recruiters, but they know the requirements, and it's in the recruiter's hand, not safety's. So only, I think it's less than 10% of those applications get pushed to safety for review that maybe are on the line. That absolutely will speed things up versus safety handling all of them.
Okay.
I don't know the answer, but I know that people are approving and qualifying in 2 to 3 days. Driver comes in on Wednesday and they get them in orientation the next Monday.
Right.
Anyway, I don't know for sure.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. Now I wonder, I remember we've talked in the past about just
conditional.
No, like what's the life cycle of the lead from like the time the lead is submitted to the actual hire?
Right. That's about 25 days.
25 days.
Yeah, but
which is different than qualifying.
That's
I know,
right.
But I was trying to put some more time, I guess some framework around it. All right, let's move on to.
I got one more though. I would say the driver, some recruiters, you can do a conditional offer and they'll go ahead and schedule them for orientation before all that's done. Again, that is dependent on each fleet, but.
Okay. If we didn't answer your question very well, I hope, let us know. We'll try to find a better answer to that specific question. I know we had some unknowns there, but we're always running research And that's something you guys feel free just to add it to the chat. We do research and surveys almost every month. Our marketing team does. So if you have specific data that you need, which we haven't done a real fleet benchmarking study in a while. We're doing one currently on AI, but to get kind of, I think just a benchmarking on some of that stuff, we need to update some of that. So that'd be a good idea. All right, moving on to the deadly sin number 3. And this is all about envy, or the idea of chasing after things just because they're shiny. And this came specifically from research we did. Was that last month or 2 months ago? 2 months ago, we surveyed a lot, I think about 300-400 drivers on their AI usage. And one thing that we did discover is GIO, or, generative engine optimization, and the idea of like showing up in AI results. That's not yet, it will be, but it's not yet a huge component of how drivers look at fleets and compare fleets and research jobs. So we probably don't spend a long time on this, but I think the big idea here is don't just get technology because it's new and fun. Make sure there's actually a use case for making the driver's life better, and actually a revenue case for additional hires. Obviously, this is a little bit self-serving, but the biggest area where we've seen where AI has made a big difference is just fielding inbound phone calls and creating more efficiencies in how quickly drivers can submit their info. Yeah. So that speed to lead is really the biggest area of improvement that AI is playing currently, I feel.
Yeah.
Agree?
Yeah, I agree. You just got to be, what's the word, wise, or ask a lot of questions, because I think a lot of vendors are throwing out AI on the front end of everything they do, and there's really nothing special about it.
Right. Yeah, I agree. All right. Deadly sin number 4. Boy, we're moving through fast. We did have one question here in the chat. It says, if you were late to change with the market, like we were talking about what is important changes, what can you do to catch up quickly? Well, one would be work with a really good partner, because they're talking to a lot of fleets. They're going to have insights that may be a bit of a blind spot to you. The other would be understand what's important in the market that you're dealing with. I think it's, I can remember when in, the post-pandemic market where it's like, it's all about, lead to hire is by far the most important metric, right? Cost per lead almost becomes irrelevant. And so it's little things like that of understanding what is the metric that is actually the lead measure to your goal of what you're trying to accomplish. So I would say, you have anything you would add there?
Yeah, I would ask, hopefully they're a client of ours. If they are, I would ask them to reach out to myself or their team and see if we can do kind of a consultation. Just take a look at some benchmark stuff.
For sure.
One quick one would be, obviously, is your pay aligned? That's an easy one. We can help there. Maybe you already know that piece, but there are definitely other things that I think don't get noticed, and we can help maybe surface. One of them, again, this was from just today, but a client, the majority of their fleet are Peterbilt 579s, great vehicles. And on Truckers News right now, we're running a poll, which I think it has about 300 respondents so far, to the driver. What equipment do you like best? Mm-hmm. If I remember correctly, the last time I looked at it, by far, the Peterbilt ranked the highest.
We need to check that.
The example is this fleet, the majority, or this company, their fleet, the majority of their fleet was the Peterbilts, but nowhere in their advertising were they even mentioning it. That's a quick win. So there's probably a few of those for each of our clients that we can just do a quick consultation. Let's dig into and see. I'm assuming the comment was, hey, if we were a little behind. I took that as maybe we didn't increase our pay as quickly as we should have, but there are other things that we can help get out there fast that should give you a little bit of a competitive advantage.
We have another question, anonymous question. It says, back to reputation. How can I know what my organization's reputation among drivers is?
I mean, Can you answer that better than me? NPS score, can they do something specific?
So yes. So there are internal surveys. So you kind of want to get a gauge of how your drivers think about you. And I don't think the one that I'm thinking of is still around, or they got bought up, Workhound.
There's stay metrics.
Yeah.
And,
There's several companies that offer internal survey services.
but that would be current drivers.
That's current drivers in the market. There's several things you can look at. Search data,
right.
and
Keyword search.
Keyword search, and see how that's trending over time.
I would say too, if again, if you don't have to be a client of ours, but if we can get some details on that fleet, flatbed, 1,000 trucks, whatever requirements, we can also benchmark off of another 25 or 30 of our clients and just show some data on cost per lead. That is a big indicator that says, hey, the same channels for this company takes me $100 to get a lead. For this company, I can get a lead for $30.
Right.
That does have.
Yes, that'd be a great
value.
cross comparison from similar fleets, and then what it costs to bring in a driver. And then some of it is another kind of easy one is just being active on reviews, looking at like Glassdoor reviews, looking at Indeed reviews. You can get a little. I mean, that's going to skew. Generally, people are way more likely to leave negative reviews. So one negative review doesn't necessarily mean something. But if you can compile, like, this thing keeps popping up, it kind of gives you a little bit more indication. And then I will say,
oh, look at that. Is the team seeing that, or are we just seeing that?
That's just us.
Oh, they pulled up the driver or the Truckers News survey.
Oh, appreciate it.
Look at that.
I will say, so it was 35% on the Peterbilt 579. The one area that you talked about NPS, and I brought this up before, but we did a study a couple of years ago where we looked at referral and rehire rate, and specifically, we looked at both. But then with referral rate, we tried to correlate it to the size of your referral bonus. And within, like, if you were in that kind of normal range, I think there was probably a tipping point where it's like, if you offered a $20,000 referral bonus, you'd probably get some. But how far above or below you are on the average of referral rate is somewhat of an indicator of how much fleets or drivers are willing to recommend your fleet to other drivers. So that was a mouthful, but the idea is your referral and rehire rate are a little bit of an indicator of your reputation.
Yes, I agree. But I also think sometimes the C-suite's disconnected there, and they do not offer a good enough referral bonus. Right. Hey, one other thing on, dang it. Oh, Reddit.
No swearing.
I was going to ask about Reddit.
Okay.
I don't know if I'm in there, and there's a couple different trucker. Do you call it a subreddit when you're subscribed in Reddit? Is that what it's called? Well, I'm subscribed to a couple of different trucker forums or subreddits. I've never done it, so this is completely off the cuff. But if you have, jump in Reddit and just ask in that trucker Reddit, hey, what do you think about this company, your own company, and just see what you get back. I read them all the time. I was in there today reading about tarping pay and what drivers are expecting for tarp pay, what they get for tarp pay.
We have another question in the audience chat. David Gingo. Hopefully I said your last name right. I'll just go with David, my name too. What is a good average referral bonus?
It's going to be dependent on the fleet. If I had some cost per hire information, that would help. But somewhere around $2,000, $2,500, $3,000. But just without knowing anything, $2,000 is safe. I see a lot of folks that it's $500. And then I also see some other ones that are on the other side of that. That's $5,000 for every driver they refer. So we can help dig into the specifics, but $2,000 is a good kind of baseline.
All right. Let's see. All right. Moving on to number 4, which is the idea. It's called wrath, whatever. But the idea there is how important that first interaction or the first phone call with the driver is. Obviously, when a driver calls in, that's his highest intent moment. I don't know if do we have the stat in here of what percentage of drivers, if they're interested in your fleet, their first move is to call. Can you get on that stat? But it's a majority. The majority of drivers, that the biggest cohort of drivers, when they're interested, they call. And as we said, they're talking to 6 to 8 fleets at one time. You really need to capture that high intent moment, make it very impactful for the driver, make sure you're interested. You know, I don't want to get into it all, but I mean, we've talked a million times about how recruiters should interact with drivers and, you know, understand, you know, the reason that they're calling. What about their last job is made them want to call them that day? But just the importance of making sure you answer that first call, or that the driver finds that first call valuable. And 43% say the first thing they do when they're interested, if you're serious about a specific job, first move is phone call. 43%. What would you add to that in the idea of what's important about the first call?
I just think we're in a unique industry where a good driver is driving during the day, and they are required to be hands-free. They're not typing on their phones, which is different than, you know, nursing or almost any other industry. So the best shot at talking to a really good driver while they're going down the road is a phone call.
Right.
And it's surprising to me how many fleets miss that opportunity. Or to your point,
Yeah.
it is a painful conversation. Like, it just sounds like the recruiter's annoyed.
Yeah. All right. Number 5. I don't want to spend a long time on number 5. It's a good one. And I'm curious. This is one, I don't know if he's on the call today. He did register. I've heard Scott Maldonado talk about this a lot, about like you try to cut costs out of orientation and things of that nature and the driver experience. It only costs you in the long run, because retention, you know, what's the saying, that the cheapest hire is the one you already have, or something like that, where it's like retention pays dividends, and trying to save money on that front in any capacity is more likely going to hurt you in the long run. Would you want to add anything there?
We are on number 5, right?
Yep. Number 5. Yep.
No. No, I mean, it's just talking about not being deceptive.
Yeah.
And switch and.
Yeah, which I know no one on this call would do, but it honestly happens.
I have some empathy here. The more recruiting teams I work with, rarely does it happen on purpose.
Right.
And I would argue that most recruiters are like, they pride themselves in saying, I'm going to shoot them straight. I'm not going to tell a driver something just to have them come over.
Right.
And sometimes it's at the detriment of, you're not even giving them all the benefits your company has.
Right. That makes
However, there is so much nuance to the pay package and the cent per mile and how many days you're going to run and how often I can get you home depending on where you live. So some of it is just confusing, or it is a lot of info. So I don't think it happens for the most part on purpose.
Right.
But I think recruiters need to be better versed in what they're offering, and then walk the driver through it and help explain it, and then have some empathy on the driver. If they're looking at 6 or 8 carriers at a time, they are going to get confused and say, you told me I could be home every week. Like, no.
That's true. Yeah.
But I don't think it's on purpose.
Okay. Well, that's a good balance. We got, this says, Lydia, she's moved over to the live chat. Are retention bonuses common? Would love some recommendations on what this looks like for a fleet size of 1,500.
A retention bonus?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they're pretty common. Annually, I guess. I'd like to know more, but yeah, they're absolutely common. And some of it's just the nuance of, is it quarterly? Is it annually? What does it look like? What are the hoops that they have to jump through to get it? But I would say 70% of our fleets offer some type of a retention bonus. Yes.
Okay. Maybe because Lydia's asking kind of specific fleet size, we could probably, because she mentioned she was already working with a account executive here.
Okay.
And so maybe we can kind of give her some comps to give her a starting point, because she's offering for like some recommendations.
Absolutely.
All right. Now for the big reveal, the big reveal of the two sins that you did not know about that were not in the original download. One is ignorance. Number 6, ignorance, flying blind. And one of the biggest things, we did a big research piece earlier this year and talk about kind of the change in driver mentality and sentiment over the last 10 years, because we've been doing research here so long at Randall Reilly. And I think one thing that stood out to me a lot was just that, I'm trying to think of how even to phrase this, is that if it used to all be about pay, like it was just like I'm going for the highest dollar beforehand and I just want to be the highest paying fleet. It seemed like the pay ranges, I don't know why, but the pay ranges have, tightened up a little bit. There's not as much, I guess, dynamic properties to it.
I think,
but what also, it seems like the way drivers put their, there's a lot of data. So like the meta analysis of how drivers were, reporting back to us is that stability played a way bigger role in how they chose a fleet. So it was less like, show me my home time, and more like, I'm really interested in specific routes. Like I want a regional route, or I want to, a dedicated route sort of thing. And I'm willing to sacrifice a little bit of pay because pay's condensed so much more. I'm willing to sacrifice a little bit of pay. By the way, the ignorance there is, because I kind of got off track. The ignorance there is that having the data to understand how drivers have changed. And this one's all about just data and how things have changed over time. But do you remember that research? Did you kind of get the same?
Yeah, I think what I remember was the gap between like an over the road driver would make $25,000 more than somebody who's home weekly. So
yes,
I know that's part of it is some of that shrunk.
And I remember when we talked because you and I did that live here, and the audience was very much on board of like, hey, it's harder than ever to try to recruit OTR drivers. And it was interesting that, kind of the research kind of indicated that if you got to recruit OTR drivers, obviously you got to talk home time, but like even the idea of home time was less attractive to drivers than the idea of route selection. Like I want a stable route. I want to have more guarantee rather than like home weekly or home every 2 weeks sort of thing.
Yes. I mean, these throw me off a little bit because it says flying blind.
I know. Listen, there's some marketing spin on it. That's what we do. That would kind of look weird. That was
I know I keep referencing this.
That was this. Don't tell my boss. That was this thing.
I keep referencing this, but kind of reviewing some of this and doing a consultation with each of our clients on some of this stuff where maybe digging into their metrics a little bit. And I know that's when I'm reading this, it's not specifically what this is saying, but when I think of flying blind, I think most directors of recruiting, vice presidents of recruiting have good data.
Right.
But there may be some blind spots that they haven't looked at. And we were in their office a few weeks ago, one of them that they hadn't looked at. And you may say, well, that's, should have been common sense. But I think everybody kind of gets in their little lanes.
Right.
They had a very robust budget. They had large hiring needs. They had a ton of inbound full applications. All the metrics looked like, for this amount of applications, you should absolutely be hiring the number you need. I think they needed 80 drivers a month in orientation. Once we dug into it and spliced it, 75% of their applications were local home daily apps.
Right.
But only 20% of the open jobs were local home daily. So
that makes sense.
The vendor, their partners were patting themselves on the back. Look how many full applications I'm getting you. It just was not in line with the open positions, if that makes sense.
Right.
I think that's an example of flying blind where the overall data looked good until you actually dug in. So
I mean, Josh said, I feel like Josh says this in every video where it's like, well, the answer is specific to your fleet, which is so true. There's so much nuance and like when you dig in to understand like what is the data actually saying. But yeah, just broad strokes of this many applications equal this many drivers is and once again, come back to, not to keep tooting our horn, but having a good partner that has done this with many fleets and probably fleets that are very similar to yours is so helpful. It just to get a different set of eyes on things.
That's right.
All right. And for the final sin, gluttony, eating too much. This one was a bit of a, can we be honest? This one's a bit of a stretch. Can we be honest? All right. This one's a bit of a stretch, but the idea here is in a market that is tightening with capacity, and you kind of you talked about earlier a fleet that said, I'm only full applications. It seems like to me, you have to be willing, if you want to really hire the amount of drivers, if you have a big need to fill, you have to be willing and able to work multiple types of leads. You need to be able to work, sometimes you need to be able to work multi-carrier leads. You need to be able to work short forms in phone calls. And like we just saw, you were talking about drivers are on the road. It's so much more convenient to be able to place an inbound phone call than have to stop and fill out a full form or a full app. Do you agree that, in this market, you really need to be able to work multiple types of leads?
Yeah, but I also agree too that not every recruiting department is set up the same way.
Right.
Like Josh says,
Yeah.
it is unique to each.
Every fleet. Yeah, that's
so,
true.
Part of that is, and we failed at this before too. You got to have a partner that can massage the campaign, the setup, the strategy to fit that specific recruiting department. And,
right.
If somebody's 3 recruiters who also do the screening and the interviews, there's no way they could handle hundreds of short forms and phone calls. So obviously there's strategies behind that we can help with.
Yeah. And there's technology that and products that we offer to where like you can, even if you don't have a robust recruiting department, you can make inbound calls. At least maybe short forms don't quite work, but you can make inbound calls a feature of your strategy for sure. All right. Let's go back through and you tell me which one is the biggest sin.
Put me on the spot. Let me flip through my pages. No, it's fine.
I'll read them to you.
No, it's not going to help me. Here they are.
All right. Is it pride? No, is it not understanding where you stand in the market? Speed to lead, going for AI trendy products that don't actually help your recruiting, failing on the first phone call, misleading drivers, making decisions blind, or you may not know they're blind, but not understanding the data, or the last one where you're too specific about the application type or saying like, I only work this type of lead. Which of those would you say is the number one sin?
Obviously you can,
That's too,
you got to improve,
specific.
you got to improve a little of all of them.
Yeah.
But if there was one, it would be how quickly do you move? Number 2.
Yeah. I was
moving too slow.
Yeah. And like you said, there was intentionally moving slow probably 7-8 months ago, but now it's just like, if you want to fight the tightening capacity, if you want to fill trucks, like speed is the name of the game. And there are process things you can do to help that. There are technological investments you can make to have that happen. But I think the important thing is however you attack that problem, I don't think there's a single fleet out there that wouldn't benefit from finding ways to increase their speed to lead.
I got 3 real quick.
Yeah,
and
go.
we can plug it for maybe a different call.
Go.
Take an app over the phone.
Take an app.
At least a partial app.
Yep.
Second, stop transferring calls or reduce them.
Yes.
If a recruiter answers it, let that recruiter handle it. Don't pass it off to another. They work as a team.
Okay.
You lose so much when you transfer. And then the third one, dang it, I knew I'd forget if I didn't write it down. Take a nap, don't transfer. Mother, father.
Join us next time
Yeah.
for the third tip.
It was on purpose. I do have a third one.
Well, I was going to say, while you think about it, I'm gonna go ahead and start wrapping us up, and then I will say there was another really good tip that you gave about going to Reddit threads and looking to find, what do drivers say about your fleet, that sort of thing. I thought that was a really good tip. There are a couple people that have asked about referral bonuses and retention bonuses, so I'm going to specifically kind of get to you guys to get you some specific data to make sure you have that available. And for those that are wondering, yes, this will be available. It'll be on YouTube.
Probably tomorrow, Wednesday at the latest.
Probably tomorrow, Wednesday at the latest. And of course, next month, we'll be back with another Digging Deeper. I think we're going to be talking about how fleets are using AI and like what's the most popular and all different ways they're using it at their fleet.
I remember number 3, by the way.
You remembered it?
It was automation on your leads in your system already.
Okay.
Reviewing it. What is your automation strategy with your current leads or unable to contact?
All right, so the vote is in. The number 1 sin is moving too slow, and you can take apps over the phone, stop transferring calls, and then have a review of your automation, what's in place to help you process leads faster. I think that's it, unless you have anything else you'd want to add.
Me?
Yeah.
No, I'm scared of talking.
Well, thank you, everyone. I appreciate everyone showing up. Thank you for being active in the chat and asking such good questions. We'll see you next month on Digging Deeper.